We are live from the MC Escher Studio Complex in New York each night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Then we send it again at 11 to 7 noon and 3 p.m. We call Countdown, Our Little Miracle. The real-life impact of Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker's anti-union ways is now taking shape, manifest in a mass exodus of public workers choosing to retire in lieu of accepting the draconian cuts to benefits and collective bargaining rights. In the third story on the Countdown, twice as many Wisconsin public school teachers retired in the first half of 2011 as did in each of the last 2 years. Days before students return to class, many in the state worrying veteran leadership has been lost, vacancies will go unfilled, and the size of classrooms will skyrocket. Tom Morello, guitarist of Rage Against the Machine, activist, son of a public school teacher, joins me in a moment. Throughout the end of June 4th, 935 school district employees, June, 4,935 school district employees have retired this year. It was 2,527 all of last year, 2,417 the year before. And it's not just teachers. 1,966 employees at state-run agencies have hung it up. Over 1,000 retired from the University of Wisconsin system alone. In total, 9,993 public workers retired by end of June of this year. That was a 93% increase over 2010. Earlier this month, Democrats took 2 Wisconsin state Senate seats in a recall election against Republicans. They beat a faux Democrat in July and defended 2 more seats against recall on the 16th of this month. While the effort wasn't enough to flip the balance of power and take control of the state Senate, it has voters primed for the battle to recall the governor, Scott Walker. And under Wisconsin's laws, elected officials must serve 1 full year before they are liable for a recall. And Governor Walker's 1-year anniversary, circle the calendar, January 4th. And as promised, here is Tom Morello gearing up for his Justice Tour to benefit the Nation Institute, Madison, Cleveland, and Flint next month. His 3rd full-length solo album, Worldwide Rebel Songs, dropped yesterday, as the kids say. And last month, he released the EP Uniontown, pro-union songs inspired by his experience performing at the protest against Governor Walker's anti-union bill in February. Pleasure to have you here, sir.
Nice to be here, thanks.
What moved you to take part in that protest against Walker? What was the tipping point?
I was watching the news, and there were 100,000 people in the streets of Cairo, and then it switched to 100,000 people in the streets of Madison. Yeah. And my wife was just about to give birth to our 2nd son. We were about a week away, and I turned to her and said, "I'm sorry, I think I got to go to Madison, honey." And she surprised me by saying, "Our sons are going to be union men. You need to go." And I got on the first plane, and the next day was on the Capitol steps performing with some friends.
I mentioned your mom was a public school teacher, union and everything. Yeah. We think of this attack on unions as having started recently with the Koch brothers or even the elections last fall. Is it really, do we really tie it closer to the day that Reagan fired all the air traffic controllers, or does it go even further back than that, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, I think that Patco was really the starting point, but now it's they're just trying to sweep away our last line of defense. And for me, this fight is very, very personal. My mom taught for almost 30 years in the Illinois public school system, and it was a single parent family. We did not have a lot of money, but we always had enough food on the table because my mom was a union high school teacher. So that's why when I heard that this right-wing governor was attacking folks like my mom, I was on the first plane out there. I took it very personally.
Right, because you had confidence that no matter how bad things might have been for you in that household, or how limited, let's say bad, they were not necessarily going to get any worse.
Exactly.
You had that sort of the floor beneath your feet, which is all people are asking for. They're not asking for riches and wealth and 6-day weekends. They're asking for the floor to stay beneath their feet, not people coming in and saying, "I need that wood to have for my fire so I can roast my golden hickory nuts."
Yeah. Well, it was very inspiring what I saw on the streets of Madison. Yeah. I've played at hundreds of protests and demonstrations. This was the first time where there were union police officers and anarchist students standing shoulder to shoulder demanding justice.
Music as protest, it is one of the nation's traditions. You immediately think of Woody Guthrie, you think of the Weavers, half the songs in the 60s.
Sure.
Has it been alive in the time since the 60s, and we just haven't been paying attention, or is it resuscitated? Yeah. Where do you see the two things interacting?
Well, certainly in the 70s, one of the bands that helped politicize me and drive me to a life of political activism was The Clash. And there were groups like Public Enemy. In the 90s, there was a band called Rage Against the Machine. There are plenty of artists now who are links in that continuing chain. But I think it's very interesting what the story about the teachers retiring early. It's like the slow pitch general strike that some of us were calling for back in February. It's interesting. Had everyone not gone to school that next Monday after there were 100,000 people in the streets, would Governor Walker still be in office?
Yeah. Well, what you see it then as that? What are the implications for further actions, or is it pretty much just sort of zeroed in on January 4th and the Walker recall?
Well, that's a hope. what I felt in the rotunda of the Capitol building and on the streets of Madison when there were 100,000, next day it was 150,000 people in the streets, there was so much torque, and it really seemed like this could be something that was about much more than stopping one bad law. Like this could be a watershed moment in labor history for the United States. And the solidarity that was a global, I got this really inspiring email from one of the organizers of the protests in Cairo saying, you know, we've got your back. This is something that's happening. Tyrants are falling on a global scale, you know, from the Mideast to the Middle West. And then I think the Democratic Party didn't know what to do. They didn't know what the hell to do with that. I think they were a little bit afraid that the river might run its banks, you know, and so the recall elections, of course, were very important, but I think if the demands had been bigger back in February, we might be in a very different place right now.
It's interesting. We were just talking about this before we started the interview. The idea that the Republicans, when they try to push back against the floor for ordinary people, not riches and wealth, but the floor, they always go too far. They get a plank of the floor and then they want the roof as well. And this is almost the one thing that we can still depend on is overreach. And just to it's almost as if you just need to remind people what is happening now and how much of a deterioration it is from the past. And they will take care of the rest.
And I think they very much miscalculated by starting in Madison, starting in Wisconsin. Because I know, I mean, I grew up right across the border, and I know, and you know, the time I spent there after the night after we spent one night in the rotunda of the Capitol building, then after late that night went out to one of the local pubs where there are these kind of big burly drunken Packer fans that when I'm on tour, normally the people you might sit at the other end of the bar, but they were much more staunchly pro-union and against Governor Walker than, you know, anybody else in the Capitol. So it's they picked the wrong place to pick this fight.
This is what I found out in spring training in baseball, which is a good litmus test because they're all conservatives, because they all have new money and they want to keep all of it, like we all want to keep all the money we possibly can. And they all went, "What's all this about unions? We're in a union," and you forget they're Republican members of unions. Oops. Tom Morello, whose new album Worldwide Rebel Songs just came out yesterday, and who's going back on tour to hit the message home. Great thanks and good luck with that.
Thanks very much for having me.
My pleasure. Glenn Beck explains that things are all better now for black people in this country. Well, being a black man, obviously he would know. Worst's next.